experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience presented by Underdog. Some big boosts at Underdog over the weekend. There's going to be 2 free picks if you sign up with code Mayo. Plus, for everyone out there, there's going to be a 75% profit boost Saturday or Sunday. Whether you're looking to play some college, some NFL, whatever it might be, use code Mayo at Underdog right now. We're getting into the Week 3 DraftKings picks. We'll go through lineups, projections, ownership, and try to get some different strategies on the go this week. John Breslin from 4for4.com is back on. John, we had the poll last week between you, myself, and Eric, and guess what? Chuba Hubbard's a winner.
Yeah, Tony Pollard still put up 92 rushing yards, just didn't get there in the receiving work, no touchdowns. Yeah, Chuba had a nice game.
If you want the optimizer, the ownership projections, and all of John's work, go to 4for4.com. Use code Mayo. Get yourself 25% off all packages that are up there right now. From ShipItNation.com. You thought he was fired. I was joking. It's Toe Tag and Tambo back from his wedding. What's going on, man?
What's going on? It wasn't my wedding. It was my sister's, but I'm hoping it's her only wedding ever, and I'm not going to another one ever during the football season, but appreciate it. Love to hear a nice Canadian came through in the clutch, Chuba Hubbard, to get the job done while the other Canadian wasn't on the show with you, Pat, but excited for this week and a fun one ahead with Carson Wentz being 4,000 when we get there. It's kind of fun slate.
Well, we had this last week with Mac Jones at $4,000. I didn't even actually look at what the optimal was. When you did your lineup review, Tambo, what was it? What was like the proper way to allocate everyone last week? Because quarterbacks in general were just super cheap.
Yeah, I didn't actually do my review show this week, but of note, because I paid attention to it still, was like the Daniel Jones. And obviously, if you had Russell Wilson, you were in really good shape because you could go neighbors. Wan'Dale Robinson ended up being announced in late, which was good because Blanton was out on the other side, so it kind of made sense for him in the slot there. And then obviously, if you like Lamb, Pickens, any of those guys, so kind of the overstacks of that Giants Dallas game was all you needed.
John, we built some fire lineups on the show last week. We built like 5 really, really bad ones. I know this because I entered the Dak Prescott skinny stack with CeeDee Lamb and Malik Neighbors into the big 250. And then I used my Joe Flacco lineup into the big $100. Fortunately, one came near the top, one came, I think, dead last. But we had a Lions one in the $10 that was good until it wasn't with some of the late games. So I feel like we were all over it with the right pieces to go with, the games that we wanted to target. Because I can't remember if it was you or Eric that really wanted to hammer down on the Dallas game. I believe it was you, and you were right.
Yeah, I actually ended up finishing 14th in the Millie Maker, in the $20 Millie Maker. So that's the biggest contest on DraftKings. If I had put the same 150 lineups into the 555 Millie Maker, I would have won it. Of course, I also would have, would be spending $75,000 on DraftKings a week, in entry fees, which isn't quite my style. But happy with the finish. It was still a good payday.
So what are we thinking about this week? Do we have to adjust what we're thinking, or does it feel like all 3 of us are getting kind of close to what we want to do, and maybe the breakthrough is coming, John?
I'll say I think the thing that stands out to me this week is that we have like one standout game, I think, for the first time this year where, it's got over a 50-point total, really close spread. That's the Dallas and Chicago game. So I think that's the first decision point of the week is do you game stack that game, or do you want to try to get sneakier and go somewhere?
Well, where do you land on it, Tambo? Because John's right. Like, it's a huge total. I ran the optimal. We'll get to that in a minute. And it's just spitting out Dallas players.
Yeah, you're going to see that. Actually, I see the Chicago side as well too early just because, people won't have as much faith in them. We did see something at a Rome Odunze where people are going to be comfortable or at least to go there. But like you said, it's a standout game, and it's also the afternoon slate. So when you talk about late swap, or some people play early only, PM only, but it's definitely going to be a decision point and a game that you're going to want to have points in, I think. So you're going to, even if you're not going there fully, finding some way to attack it is always a good idea as well in the secondary stack.
I used the optimizer at 4for4.com. Again, code Mayo to get yourself the 25% off all of the tools and everything like that. And here's what it spit out for me. We got Dak Prescott at quarterback with Pickens and Jake Ferguson as a receiver and tight end, Bijan, Kamara, and McCaffrey as your flex plays, Jacoby Myers at 5,600, Troy Franklin. Big shout out to Eric from last week. Big on Troy Franklin. He's only moved up to $4,000. He's the other wide receiver. Then you have the Jets down at $2,200, Tambo, as the defense that we're looking through. What do you see that we can make some pretty easy adjustments here? Because we have no Bears players in this huge Dallas stack.
Yeah, if you're going to go with the Dallas side, hitting the ceilings, you don't always need a run back by any means, but certainly a good idea. And there's possibilities here with the price tags of the guys that we have in. So you're kind of right in those zones. it's going to be more as we go throughout the show, just talking about the spot though, because, and I'm interested in what John thinks too, just because the setup of this game being such an outlier, how he handles that. And then with it being a late swap opportunity, obviously if your stuff in the morning comes through, you could feel like, especially if it's lower owned stuff, you could feel more comfortable moving to this spot. But if your stuff in the morning fails, then it's not really a good idea to fully sit in this spot unless you're getting extremely different within this game, because you're going to be so far behind everybody else that has those low owned pieces that went off in the morning or whatever.
Yeah.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I would just say I think that's really good insight. I think that's one of the things people don't think about enough is like how do the games play out throughout the day? Is it a 1 o'clock game or a 4 o'clock game? Especially when you have a game like this that could be heavy chalk. Is do you want to try to play some really different pieces in the early game and then go chalkier in the late game, or vice versa? And just thinking about where the game sits in the day of games.
Well, I want to remind everyone to sub to Mayo Media Network if you want to get into the live chat that's going on right now. Hit us up over there, smash the like where you're there. And if ever you want to listen to us on demand, obviously on the YouTube channel, you can find that. But if you're going out for a walk, you're in the car, Apple and Spotify, download the Pat Mayo Experience, subscribe to it, and leave us a 5-star review. That would be very helpful. So what do you guys want to do to this lineup? Well, let's take a look at it. Where can we make some different pieces here? Because we don't have Lamb in it. We have Pickens in it. We have a tight end in it. No Bears, as mentioned, John. And then you have, I don't love Alvin Kamara. Maybe we just get rid of him.
Yeah, I think we could go there. I mean, I think he's fine, but I don't think he needs to be in the lineup. I'd say that we should be giving some consideration to Jordan Mason stepping in for Aaron Jones. He's only 5,400, and that the Minnesota injuries seem to have happened after pricing got set. So I think Mason's a little bit too cheap at 5,400, so we could drop down from.
So, Tambo, when we're looking at this right now, I just subbed out Kamara for Mason at $5,400. I swapped out Jacoby Myers from Roma Dunze at $5,300. Now, all of a sudden, we have $1,200 to play with in this lineup that got spat out.
Yeah, I was trying to see. It's always tough to track these, but if you go Jacoby Myers to Rome, it's like this is definitely a better version of it. I think John, though, hit the nail on the head, because when you're talking about this slate, like the first thing I noticed about the optimal was there was no Minnesota or Cincy in there. And I know we've got some injured quarterbacks, but people, and I know it's a 42.5 total, but like people just don't realize this game could go under and be, 21-17, and it's an under, but that could be, that could end up being 4 touchdowns just like that, or 5 touchdowns that end up happening. And these prices on these players are still extremely underpriced. So while people may say, oh, but they have this shitty quarterback throwing to them, or, oh, that's not one of the, there's so many better totals on the slate, all this, that, and the other. The guys that are popping off the pages are still within those games. And the Mason one, like John said, was out before the Jones stuff. So at 5,400, he was the first piece I thought of as well. And if you didn't like Kamara, he makes perfect sense just to plug in there.
So the other thing we could do, we could launch McCaffrey from this lineup. We know that the Cardinals are dealing with massive issues in their secondary. So the move that we could make here to try to get a little mini stack on the go, maybe try to take advantage of that spot and then try to pair up with Mason. We can just take out McCaffrey and move that just 1v1 directly to Jamar Chase if we wanted to. And then you could turn Troy Franklin to Juwan Jennings. And then you have that San Francisco play. And I really like Juwan Jennings this week. I think that's wildly undervalued for $5,000. I know that he's not practicing yet, John, but he did the same thing last week. And he was clearly the preferred option of Mac Jones in that game against the Saints. I'd say that, hey, maybe that was a matchup issue that Jennings was able to exploit that. But every game that we've seen Jennings in where Ayuk hasn't played, he has been the focal point of this offense through the air.
Yeah, and actually, we need to pay attention to the San Francisco injury report on a couple different fronts because Brock Purdy could be coming back as well, which would give Jennings another boost.
What do you make of it, Tambo?
I mean, the Brock Purdy news is certainly the one to keep the eye on. Like you said, that came out yesterday, so we'll see.
Do you care about that, though? Like whether Purdy plays or Mac Jones plays? Do you think it's going to be all that different?
Maybe not, but it's just more of, you feel a little bit better when the starter comes back in, and then, maybe that boosts the other guys just slightly. It's like, Mac Jones was more of a price play last week than anything. It's not like anybody loves Mac Jones. It's usually the case of, the price. And that's kind of the situation when we'll get there this week with the Wentz stuff I brought up earlier. There is super fans out there of Carson Wentz, but it's more about just the price and how to attack the slate. And typically you'll see that, especially in the higher dollar, smaller field stuff, people will still find a way to, team jam them in these days. Involves when you get a slate like this with a really cheap quarterback that has a running back at 5,400 that you can use with him or leverage. You can go to the Justin Jefferson. People are joking about the battle of Jefferson versus Jamar Chase when they both have a backup quarterback. And then even guys like I think Hawkinson is 3,800 on this slate. So a Wentz stack, whether you truly like it or not, or believe in the game or not, like it's just priced extremely low. And then you could start fitting in guys everywhere else versus your initial optimal setup with all the pretty cheap wide receivers, right? For the most part.
So do you, just thinking back to the Dallas and the Cowboys and Bears game for a second, John, if we're not going to do Dak, I mean, you could even throw Lamb into this chase spot, use Higgins instead of Pickens, that kind of thing, and try to figure it out that way. But if it's not going to be an overload of the Dallas passing game with one run back of the Bears, what do you think that is there a contrarian way to play and stack up this game? Obviously, it would be the Caleb Williams side, or maybe it's like Caleb Williams, Adunze, or Caleb Williams, DJ Moore with Javonte Williams coming back. Like, is there any merit to try to build a lineup like that, or are you just trying to get too fancy?
No, I think there's a lot of merit to trying to get different with this game, because I think a lot of people are going to look at the high total and they're going to go immediately to the passing game. And it really depends what quarterback are you using? Like, you could use a quarterback from a different game and then use the running backs from the Dallas Chicago game. So you could use Javonte Williams. You could use Swift and say that maybe that game is still high scoring ish, but the points are just coming through the ground instead of the passing game. They're not necessarily airing it out. I think there's a lot of ways you can get different. I think Chicago especially has some guys like the tight end, Colston Loveland. Like, maybe he gets more involved this week. Like, that's a way to get different, and get very low ownership. You could maybe even go to like Luther Burden and say maybe it's the week that he starts seeing some action. But that's probably for like very large contest, large field contest where you're trying to really beat 100,000 people. But yeah, I think there's plenty of ways to get different in this game, and I think that's a good idea.
How would you even just rejig the one that we have up on the screen right now, Tamba? We don't need to flip it to the Bears side. We can build that side out. But how would you try to make this a little bit different? Because it's starting to look a little bit chalky here.
It's looking a little bit chalky, and I want to talk about something different because I frame it up for everybody. I know the chat's talking about it. We can talk about this now, but I zoom out. I call it zooming out to 40,000 feet. It's a common statement. People use it all the time. But in DFS, what my take here is like the way you started and what we have now doesn't matter until it does. Like, Christian McCaffrey is in the last game of the slate at the same time that big game is in the last game of the slate. And I know CMC is not even in the current build, but just noting it, I don't care if anybody likes DJ Moore or Caleb Williams or Colston Loveland or whoever these people are to them. You may have to like them, because the biggest thing on the slate is what we keep saying. It's in the morning. We have to go back to that and decide on this Minnesota spot, because if you play a bunch of Jordan Mason and he fails, I don't care if you think Dak and all those guys are better. The lineup, like you said, you have on the counter is too chalky. You're going to have to all of a sudden like something different or go to a completely different spot. And this is still the piece of edge on classic slate that's left there is laziness. It's not even late swap. It's laziness. And it's people don't swap. They don't think about the slate as a whole, and they just build lineups and say, oh, wow, these all seem pretty good. The guys said they were awesome picks and plays. Let's see how it goes. This slate is decided by what the morning running back does, and then what the big games in the afternoon do. And you really should not be on that heavy of a chalk build if the morning busts for you.
So let's say we are going to late swap here, John. There's obviously 4 games that you can go to, the Dallas, Chicago being primary of those. I'd say that the Arizona and San Francisco game would probably be second, but you still have Chargers and Broncos and Saints and Seahawks. I'm guessing no one is going anywhere near the Saints and Seahawks game unless it's JSN, Walker, maybe, and Kamara on the other side. Is there any value in that game? Like, if we had to if Mason fails and we do fall behind, and whoever doesn't have Mason has the running back that goes off in the morning, and we do need to get a little bit different here in order to catch up in some of these contests, where do you think is the better way to go looking and go fishing to try to catch up on some of these points?
So, yeah, it depends if you're really trying to get different or not. Because I was going to say in the afternoon games, I think Jackson Smith-Njigba is one of my favorite plays on the week. He's second in the NFL in receiving yards and receptions, but he's priced way down the price list. So I think he's really underpriced, especially on DraftKings with a full point per reception. But if we're looking at a scenario where like our chalk failed early in the morning and then we need to get a little bit different, I think you can still get different within the afternoon games. I'd maybe look at like somebody from the New Orleans side, like Chris Olave or Rashid Shaheed, and try to get a little bit different. Like, she's one of my favorite players to get different with, because he's so explosive. He can put up a long touchdown. Like, he's one of those guys you turn on the TV and you see somebody running down the field 80 yards. You think, was that a kickoff return? It's like, no, it's just like a screen pass, and she took it to the house. So he's one of my favorite players to get different with. But I think people aren't going to go to the New Orleans passing game. And Alvin Kamara should see some ownership, so there's maybe some leverage off that.
So the other way I'd look at it too, I mean, Juwan Johnson's in that game, who I wouldn't mind if all of a sudden you just really need to get off of Dallas or Chicago guys, or you had McBride and you know that he's going to be popular in this late slate, that he's another option you can go to, Tambo. Just looking at it for me, maybe it's like Quentin Johnston or Ladd McConkey, because it feels like the Chargers, because they're playing Denver, that the Chargers passing game is going to be wildly overlooked of these 4 games, and they have looked good through 3 games. I know it's a bit spread out, but if they actually do have to go passing this week, I mean, Indianapolis took it to Denver's defense. Like, they didn't have to let up. Their guys were able to accomplish what they wanted to. They even went at Surtain in that game, that maybe the Chargers can just do that. And, all of a sudden Herbert's passing for 303 touchdowns.
Yeah, and plus it's just, you don't have to go all in on a stack or something like that. I like your original point of, if you just go to those guys for the PPR points and pick them up that way, there's certainly options here, because they'll still have to throw. They may not score as many points as you think. The Denver D is tough, but there's the spot where they can just rack up, 8 catches, 100 yards or whatever, and that's still pretty solid. So, maybe QJ gets in for another touchdown. The surprising thing about him, I mentioned it last week on I think it was the Monday night doubleheader. Anyway, was he actually had, everyone talks about how bad he was last year and how many things he dropped. I agree. I saw it too, but he still ended up having 9 touchdowns last year, which was nuts. So it feels like he could have had a huge year, and already this year he's off to the races with a couple. So I don't hate that. I definitely was going to say a couple things. John said one, JSN. The other one you said, Pat, was Juwan Johnson. He's $100 less than Ferguson, and you're able to move to him. He's 20 minutes before that game, but again, he's a guy that's right there. You could use him. If Kamara's picking up steam, maybe you can use him that way instead. So there's other games in the morning that you can get to your stacks too, but I'm just saying in the afternoon, the other spot that I liked was the one we originally had talked about was San Francisco, right? We'll got to wait on some news there and see what happens, but I still kind of like that spot as well. Just especially if CMC is going to pick up steam as the week goes on also.
So I'm going to submit this one as a chalky lineup. I am playing in the $10 here, and we'll go through, and I'll try to get the 10 lineups that go into it, and we'll try to build off some of those. Do you want to build out the Chicago side of this stack, or maybe even a more enhanced version of the Dallas side, John, or is there a different game that you'd like to go to?
I definitely think you should be looking at the Chicago side as well. But I'm also willing to, there's plenty of games on the schedule. So if we want to get a little bit different, if we were going to get different, I think the next place I would go is the Minnesota Cincinnati game, and I'd put it in Carson Wentz at 4,000 and go from there, because there's a couple of high priced receivers we can go to in that game. But I definitely think Caleb Williams is a guy I'm going to be featuring heavily in my lineup. So it might be worth building out a Chicago stack.
Well, let's build that out. We'll start with Caleb Williams, Tambo. Where do we go from here? Because I think that Odunze and CeeDee Lamb or Javonte as the bring back is the very clear option of what to do here. Would you have any problems? DJ Moore has been terrible. Would you try to squeeze him in here just to get different with this side of the stack? Or because we're playing this side of the stack, we don't have to get too cute?
I'd be fine. I actually would love that. I think again, it's one of those week 3 things where everyone thinks everyone's done. Right now, they've seen 2 full weeks. They must know it all, and then you all of a sudden see these guys still have these breakouts and whatnot. And I mean, Tyreek was doing backflips in the end zone last night, so he was dead before arrival. It's not like he had the craziest game, but just of note, guys can definitely come back around. So I would be willing to leverage Odunze and just play DJ Moore and then fill it out differently that way, or put Loveland in there as another piece and skip on Odunze, or I'd be willing to stack up Odunze and use him in a different way where it's okay, Caleb, him, and then whoever you choose, whether it's DJ Moore, Loveland, whatever you want to go to next. But I do like putting DJ Moore in there myself personally.
So let's do Caleb Williams and DJ Moore, John. What do you want to do from the Dallas side? Do you want to do Javonte and Lamb, and hopefully it just gets spread out that way, or just stick to one Cowboy, play 2 and 1, and then build out around it?
I think the Chicago receivers are so cheap that I like going to CeeDee Lamb. I like building these Chicago stacks and putting in CeeDee Lamb. I don't mind the idea of putting in both Javonte Williams and CeeDee Lamb, and hoping the game is somewhat similar to the Dallas Giants game we just saw, where the teams are just going back and forth in the fourth quarter. Javonte Williams put up a bunch of points, getting receptions late in that game, but those count, right? So I think you could definitely have a Caleb Williams Chicago, maybe even double stack, and then run it back with Javonte Williams and CeeDee Lamb, and you're really overstacking this game. But I like the idea of overstacking this game. I think people are going to get to pieces of this game, but if you want to build this game as a shootout, you want as many pieces as possible.
Well, the only question I would have here is that, Tambo, you've talked about this before, of like when we stack up a game and we use up all our wide receiver spots, that tends to make us a little bit more different because people will want to use a tight end or a running back so they can get one of those other chalkier wide receiver pieces to go in. Would you even consider that instead of Javonte Williams here, we go Caleb, DJ Moore, Roma Dunze, CeeDee Lamb, just to throw Pickens in it as well? Because I think Pickens goes crazy in this game.
Yeah, I'm definitely fine with that if you want to move off Javonte and then use up our running backs, because then we're different in a couple different ways, because while we're using all three of our wide receiver slots on this game, we're also using our flex on this game, but our flex for a wide receiver. So if a lot of these lineups are going to have Mason, they're definitely going to have a second running back like we're about to put in, but a lot of them might go with a third running back because they go to Ferguson instead of Pickens or something like that. That will separate us a little bit, not just being on the opposite side. It also gives us a ton of late swap flexibility when we have a full flex spot available to us as well. So I'm fine with the Pickens play. Like you said, and like John mentioned, when you already have DJ Moore, Odunze, Pickens, all sub 6K, $5,600 Caleb, you can kind of get away with whatever you want. And I know, Pat, this is where you sometimes like to just throw in the cheap D just to see what it does. If you put in the Jets D that we used originally just to see, you're going to have cheaper tight ends. You're going to be able to get pretty much whatever you want here still, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, you don't even have to go to the Jets, I don't think, in this circumstance either. If there's anyone else that you feel I really like the Texans, John, at $4,000 or $2,700. I'd be willing to eat that $500 so we don't have to go with a bottom of the barrel defense.
Yeah, actually, I don't mind the defense on the other side of that game in the Jaguars. The Texans' offensive line's not look good, so I think you can go to either defense from that game. Not particularly a low scoring game, but it doesn't have to be to put up a good fantasy defense score.
So weirdly, when we get to tight end, you mentioned there's some cheap options, Tambo. Like Bowers, he didn't look 100% on Monday night. Maybe he's a little bit better now, but he's still the highest priced guy. McBride is really the only healthy one of the bunch. His Kraft and Warren are even banged up now as well. Kraft hurt his knee in practice 2 days ago. He said he's going to be fine, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. But he's now being priced up at $4,700. We could go cheap, take someone like Juwan Johnson in that Seattle game, and then try to flip it over and get a stud running back on the other side. But one of the spots and one of the main reasons that I didn't want to use the Jets is I've watched the Jets now for 2 weeks. They can't stop anyone on the ground. This is a Bucky Irving goes mental game.
Yeah, maybe. I had a different variation in there that I think makes sense, because I guess like the main thing that you always talk about and we go through on these shows, whether it's for football or for golf season when we're doing it, is like, what is this leaving us with? And you already have Mason in there. So once you've kind of looked at it from that angle, certainly you could take out Mason and go to someone like Hawkinson in a version of this and see what that does for you, where you're still getting in some action on that. But if you're not going to play Ferguson and you're not going to play Kamara, even though you're like, well, what do those have to do with each other? The thought to me was Juwan Johnson, like you said. And then you mentioned, well, what type of stud running back can that get us? Well, it actually happens to get us Jonathan Taylor with his defense going against a very bad Tennessee team. And so if you put in Taylor, Mason, Juwan Johnson, you just land on the, again, do you need to do this? No, but it's looking at the angles for what makes sense. And now you go back, Pat, to the original optimal that we had. This is way less chalky overall. It's built quite differently, and it still has a ton of good pieces on this slate that fit in for the spots you had us in your optimal.
The other thing too, John, that if we swap Caleb for Dak, I think it's only $100 of difference between 57 and 5,600. Weirdly, I think that because obviously we're playing for a ceiling here. If Caleb he has a chance to suck way more than Dak does. I think everyone would agree with that. But I think fantasy-wise, because he runs, he actually has a better ceiling.
Yeah, we could do that because Caleb Williams has been putting up some pretty good rushing totals. I think he's got like 85 rushing yards already through 2 games this season. But you know, we have a Dak lineup out there already, so portfolio diversification, right? You know, I think, I think you know this lineup is good. I was gonna say that we should maybe go Colston Loveland at tight end. I know, like, you know, you like Juwan Johnson, but if we drop down to Colston Loveland, we also, I think we can afford Bijan, who I'm kind of obsessed with this week going up against the Carolina rushing defense.
I think everyone's going to be obsessed with Bijan Tambo. So the move is bet Tyler Algier like 2 touchdowns in this game.
Yeah, people always get worried about that stuff. It can happen for sure, but I'm going to just play the odds originally, and I'm going to go with Bijan as well and see what happens. If Algier gets me, he gets me. The problem is when people do that stuff, they want a victory lap it and get excited about it. Sean Tucker last season when he beat Bucky Irving, even though Bucky Irving still put up like 24 points. And it's like, yeah, you had a 0.1% owned running back that crushed. That's such a small pool of lineups that guess what? You didn't get everything else right. So unless you're like fully committed to that, you're in big trouble. But I don't mind the way John was going here. And I'm curious what that builds us out to, because I was thinking about Loveland earlier also. And then there's obviously versions that you can flip this where you're like, well, you know what? I'm going to use more for $100 more than Rome Odunze for less ownership and then get Loveland in there. But this does land us still on a pretty similar build to what we just had. Projects almost the same, and you get Bijan instead.
Yeah, and we can take DJ. I think we can take out more or Odunze from this. Do we really want to run a Caleb with 3 of his pass catchers?
I don't mind it personally, but like I said, again, it's building this in advance is like a fun game. When we get to Sunday, this may be a horrible idea based on everything that happens in the morning, but I definitely don't have a problem. Did anyone really want to build with Russell Wilson and a bunch of guys last week? Probably not. So sometimes these guys are just chucking it. And the thing that people forget is, again, same thing as a lot are probably thinking right now is, oh, wait, Caleb with 3 other guys? That seems insane. That seems impossible. One of them is 3,200. 2 of them are 54 and 53. The price, you call them a bundle, call them 2 guys. They're basically 1.5 Jamar Chases, and you're getting 3 options taken care of that all fully correlate. So again, people just look at it all wrong, as in how do 3 guys get there versus how do 3 guys at that price that they add up to get there. Big difference.
The way that I would think about this, though, if we wanted to take one of these guys out, John, is that we could take out, let's say we take out DJ Moore. You could put George Pickens into that wide receiver spot. You could take the Colts back down a couple bucks, and then you can get back into that like mid 6,000, high 6,000 for another running back if you wanted to.
Yeah, I don't know. I like the idea of overstacking the lineups. And I think Tambo hit it. These guys are pretty cheap, and there's very little opportunity cost at tight end so far this year, right? So like we're putting in a 3,200 Colston Loveland. He doesn't even need a touchdown. If he just gets 4 receptions for 60 yards at 3,200, like it's not clear that another tight end is beating him by a significant margin. If Odunze Moore and Colston Loveland do all happen to get touchdowns, like Caleb Williams is probably the quarterback you wanted to have. So I especially when you're talking about a high total game, I like the idea of overstacking the game with like 5, different, pieces from that game that are pass catchers.
It also gets us, like, if everyone is going to go to this game, I know I put out my cheat sheet on the weekends. You can find that for free up on 4for4.com. You can also get extra info plus that cheat sheet in the Mayo Media free newsletter if you're looking for it. Just sub to that down in the description of the pod or video right now. Sub to the channel while you're here and jump in the chat as well. Smash the like. But because these 2 teams are going to be so highly stacked up, Tambo, would this be a way to get really different? Is go a 4-2 because no one's really going to do that.
Yeah, it happens all the time. Like that's what it is. The afternoon game, people get excited about it. They'll run their Dak, Lamb, Pickens with Odunze, and that's what I talked about the penthouse example in week 1. Like that might be level 2 that they got to. Someone's going to outthink them on that. And if the game ends up really going off, you think back to last week, a lot of people had Dak, Lamb, Pickens with even Neighbors on the other side. Looks pretty good until it doesn't. I legit had lineups with like 7 flames in them last week that were not even close because they didn't have, I had Goff, Amon-Ra, et cetera. But if like Laporta doesn't get there and other people don't, you're going to be so far behind. And if this game truly goes off, you are going to need like 6 pieces. And so your 4 and 5 mans aren't going to be enough. So to John's point, a 4-2 can easily work there.
John, how owned is Jordan Mason going to be, do you think?
I think he'll be pretty highly owned. I don't think people would necessarily go berserk. It's not like he's like true minimum priced because he was already priced up a little bit just on the basis of getting heavy backup work, I would say, or like somewhat of a timeshare with Aaron Jones. But now he's going to be the main guy. It looks like. So I think he'll probably see ownership in the 30-ish%. I think he'll be the highest owned running back, but I don't think it's a situation where like we saw some like Zach Charbonnet situations last season. I think where in like the high-priced contest, he was like 80-something% of it.
So Mason, McCaffrey, and Bijan Tambo rate out as the best values. Do you think they'll be the 3 highest owned running backs?
Who is this? Is it Mason, Bijan, and McCaffrey?
Yeah.
That's what I'm seeing right now, and it's mainly because you saw builds, even versions that even the one you just had up with the fact that Caleb, et cetera, and all Odunze, all those guys are so cheap. Ferguson, you can easily get just a Chicago Dallas stack and fit in McCaffrey, Mason, and then it's your call if you go to Bijan or Lamb or whatever you end up fitting in there. But that's why Bijan will still be up in that group with them for sure.
If you had to outright fade one of these games to get different, John, would it be the Bears-Dallas game or would it be the Minnesota-Cincinnati game?
Ooh, to get different, I might actually like if the goal is to get different, I would probably fade the Minnesota-Chicago game. And I'd maybe hope that that game just sees rushing production instead of passing production, which I think is possible.
So Tambo, if we stack up a different game here and we don't do Bears and Dallas, we do let's say we do Cincinnati and Minnesota. What pieces from that Bears-Dallas game do you think that we should go to as one-offs or even like two guys on each side going back and forth? Is it worth doing that? Or if you're not going to stack up that game, do you just say, fuck it, and just stay away from it?
I don't think you say that. I think, Vegas has been around for a long time. The joke of always building the pyramids and the hotels and all that stuff. Like 50 and a half is there for a reason. You got to think, how does this game not go the way that other DFS players think that it goes? So I think it's more of like a Javonte Moore or Javonte Odunze or something like that. Or you could flip it, have DeAndre Swift in there. I think you got to get that this game doesn't do everything that you think it does. It slows down a bit. And maybe you just put 2 or 3 pieces from that game and one of them being a running back. I know some people have done in the past the flip pat of what we talked about earlier. If everyone's going to have 3 of Pickens, Moore, Odunze, and Lamb, or at least 2 of them, why not have Swift versus Javonte? And they each get a touchdown and 100 yards. And yes, other guys might get pieced up along the way for 8 for 60 and things like that, but it may not be as big as what you actually need for a ceiling performance to find your way onto a higher scoring lineup in the Millie Maker or something. So I would be looking at it from that perspective and still thinking about putting it in there in some way, shape, or form.
So, John, if we do that and we just pick one Bear, one Dallas player to put into this game and then build Minnesota or Cincy around it, which 2 would you go with?
I would probably start with Javonte Williams.
Yeah.
Just because, like I said, I like the idea of stacking a different game from the primary game most people are looking to stack, but you still include a piece from that game or 2 pieces, and you center it around the rushing game, the running backs from the more popular game. So in this case, I would say you play Javonte Williams, you're stacking a different game than the Chicago-Dallas game, and you're just saying Dallas is just running the ball, that's eating up the clock a little bit. You could use Swift or Javonte Williams. Those would be the top 2. I don't know if I would use both of them, but my favorite between the 2 is Javonte Williams.
All right, so let's just start with Javonte, and we'll build out either Cincinnati or Minnesota and try to do that game. Which side would you guys like to go with? 'Cause I prefer, because you can use Jordan Mason on one side. I prefer stacking up just Browning, Chase, and Jordan Mason. I think that's where the ball is going in this game.
I think Browning's going to see much lower ownership than Wentz because there's a $1,500 price difference. But I think it's okay. $5,500 is still pretty cheap, and Jake Browning has shown the ability to put up good fantasy scores.
Where would you I know that you've been talking about Wentz. Do you want to build out the Wentz part, Tambo, just to see what it looks like at $4,000? Because how much is Tyrod, or Tyrod, as he likes to be called, but no one else likes to call him that? He's $4,800. Is that cheap enough? I think I'd rather have Tyrod than have Wentz, honestly.
I think it's all depends on what you're doing. If you see that happening, obviously you can beat him on any given day with his legs, different factors. But for me, it's if I'm doing this, I like Wentz, Jefferson, Hawkinson, and then figure out what you're doing. Try and get some action out of this game. Don't necessarily have to run it back like everyone auto assumes, but I'd be fine with something like Wentz, Jefferson, Hawkinson, Javonte with Rome. You're already on some of the spots that people are in on, but you're pretty solid to be able to get different now. And you've got still pretty good money left to spend as well. So you just got to make some decisions from here on sort of the next spot that you want to attack and whether or not you want a Cincy guy. I mean, look, Browning, we at least know a little bit more about him, but we also know his price tag is $5,500. Caleb Williams is $56. Dak is $59. Guys below him like Daniel Jones are $54. Drake May, tougher matchup this week, but still $53. So it really kind of depends on how you see that. The other thing, Pat, is from your defensive perspective, how you usually pick on guys, depending on what type of quarterbacks in the pocket for them and how you expect them to use them. Do they just lean on Chase Brown here at home and try and just run that ball? What do you think about that as well?
Yeah, so on the
road.
Yeah, it's on the road. But if we're going to stack up the Minnesota passing game, do we really think, John, this game is going to be 35 34 as a final. Like if we're going all in on the Minnesota passing game, which we are through this build, we say that, let's say they put up 24 points, they're all passing touchdowns. That's great news. And we box out Jordan Mason with this. We're saying Jordan Mason's not going to do anything. On the other side of the ball, it sounds to me like maybe Minnesota was trailing in this game, and maybe they sat there and ran the ball the entire time with Chase Brown. I think that as a part of this, I think it's Jamar or Chase Brown, one of the two as the bring back.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the really appealing things about Carson Wentz is that at 4,000, like there was two high-priced receivers in this game we want to get to, Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. And if you drop down to $4,000 a quarterback, I don't know if you can put both Jamar Chase and Chase Brown in the lineup, or if that's
we can.
Yeah. So we still have like so much left per player, considering we have Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson in a lineup, with some still appealing players and Adunze and Javonte Williams.
Yeah, so I'll throw in the Texans D at $2,700, Tambo. That gives us a flex and a running back for $6,250 per player. Like, there's a lot we can do with that, I feel like.
Yeah, the Texans make it work. I was looking at, again, like however you set it up, but I was looking at the Indy D again. It landed on a guy like Jawan Jennings. If he's going to play and be in that mix, he fits the mold, and you don't have McCaffrey. So it'd be a way to separate it using a wide receiver instead of a running back. So with Houston, I mean, it's just where you want to go with it. You got the money to do whatever you want. I'm just trying to think of sort of what we had earlier and how much different this is. This is way different. And it projects like almost the same as your optimal. And it still hits up the other games in the spots that we were hitting up before. So like things like that are more what I'm looking at, especially when I'm applying it down, even in like single entry or something along those lines. And then I still have late swap with, in my example, with Jennings and with Rome and with Javonte. Like there's, not saying I would get off them because they're kind of already a little bit more unique anyway, but with Jennings and Javonte, but just examples where you could still have movement within this lineup.
I was trying to think of a different game to go to. I think that there's going to be points in that Patriots-Steelers game. I think there's going to be points in Tampa Bay and the Jets as well. I don't know how to best leverage that. I was thinking like Bucky Irving and a Jet, but there's no Jet you'd realistically want to play that would be cheap enough to fit into this lineup. I do like Bucky Irving if you can get him in. And he's a guy that I actively do want to play this week. If we do that, we're down to $5,400 for a flex. Is there anyone? I guess then it just turns into Jordan Mason, who we're supposed to be fading in this spot. Do we do like Quentin Johnson and Bucky Irving as one-offs here, or is there a better way to manipulate that salary cap, John, to make it work better for this lineup?
I would actually put in Jordan Mason.
Yeah.
I know we were saying we wanted to fade him, but like he's just too cheap, and we're making a bet on this game environment. And he catches some pass. He's not a super receiving back, but I think he's got a couple of receptions last week. I would put in Jordan Mason and just make a bet on this game environment. I know we started off with a thesis. We wanted to fade him a little bit. But like if these receivers are marching up and down the field, maybe they, get stopped at the one and Jordan Mason's punching it in.
And if we put him into our flex, I guess that does give us, I mean, if this game doesn't get us there to begin with, we're probably screwed anyway because we have to wait around. So there's no real late swap off of this, is there, Tambo? I guess if Bucky fails, then you're kind of screwed anyway.
Yeah, you're betting on this one going in, right? Like John said. And I guess I don't even hate that. Like, I think that's one of the things that people don't realize is like when you're looking at it, the thought process was just building it out by hand like this. Okay, how can we move off Jordan Mason? But if you're ever going to use Jordan Mason, that's going to be, 30 to 40% owned maybe, and maybe less, maybe it ends up being around 30. But my point would be, this would be the way to do it, right? Like you're using him in a totally different way. Everyone's just throwing Jordan Mason and then going from there. We've got Jordan Mason in with Wentz, with Jefferson, with Hawkinson, with Jamar Chase. And also same thing with the Chicago side of things. When you got a quarterback, starting running back, and their tight end at 3,800, it costs nothing. You're spending like 13.2 or something on those three positions. And you got to have a tight end. You got to play at least one. You've got a starting running back in a great spot and a quarterback that's starting. You can't really ask for much more. So how do you get different? This is exactly how. So I've got no issues with this at all.
Well, you guys think about this for a second of what game we want to go to next. Tambo, it'll be on you right after this. For over a century, Johnnie Walker has shared its bold spirit with the game of golf. Now, crafted with Devereux Golf, Johnnie Walker introduces the Johnnie Walker Blue Label-inspired Sunday Golf Bag, elevating the game with sleek design, blue label hues, and refined gold accents. Celebrate your hole-in-one with a premium Sunday bag crafted by Devereux Golf. Submit proof of your achievement to johnniewalker.com/blue-in-1.
Please drink responsibly.
All right, we're back. Tambo, did you pick a game?
I did.
All right, let's hear it.
Yeah, we're going right back to it. We're flipping everything I talked about earlier. going to Danny Dollars. We're going to leverage Jonathan Taylor, and the same way people say everybody sucks now, they'll never do it in week 3. It's the opposite. Daniel Jones was great weeks 1 and 2, but now he's going on the road in a division game. There's no way he can have another good game at just $5,400 with stackable pieces like Tyler Warren, Pittman, etc. And you're leveraging a running back that should be pretty popular in Jonathan Taylor. So don't need to run it back, but I definitely think that's another interesting spot to go here. It's not the best total. I get all that. It's another price play when Tyler Warren is 4,400, slightly more than the more popular options, but just slightly. And then you've got a guy like Pittman who's 4,900. And again, they have other options too. I'm just noting the first few that stand out.
So, John, I would be good just leaving it Daniel Jones and Tyler Warren because I don't feel like these receivers do anything and bring nothing to the table.
Yeah, this is one where, again, we'll have to monitor, like, especially today's practice reports. Because I think Warren is a little bit banged up, but I think Josh Downs is also a little bit banged up. And if either one of them actually misses the game, the other one could benefit. Michael Pittman would be standing there to benefit as well. And Jonathan Taylor, could see some boost as well if either Downs or Warren misses the game. I agree though that I think Warren is maybe the guy we want to start with, just because there's so little opportunity cost at tight end. He's got 7 receptions in each of his first 2 NFL games. He is looking by far like the better of the rookie tight ends so far. But yeah, I guess I'm not gonna be able to talk you guys into a Tony Pollard run back, so I won't even go there.
If there was a Tennessee player to play, I mean, John, you're on Team Pollard. This we know. Tambo, would it be Pollard for you? Would it be Ridley? Would it be Chig in this game? Double tight end to save even more money and overload it. Potentially go to A.O. Manor. We're both Canadian. Go with the Canadian guy here. He does seem to be a preferred target to Cam Ward. I would probably just stay away from all Titans.
Yeah, I would actually be on Pollard here. So that he's a guy that pops way up the board. We don't have a lot of cheaper running backs, but the one thing about him is he's the $300 more than Jordan Mason. And again, you're allowed to play both too if you want to get a completely different bill. But there is something interesting about that range of Pollard 5,700, DeAndre Swift 5,600, Javonte Williams 61. They're all just slightly more than Mason, and you're allowed to play them both. So it's like there could be a potential possibility to do some different things there, but I actually would be fine with Pollard in this spot. I know John mentioned him as well. It's really tricky to, peg the Ridley week or A.O. Manor. These guys, like he caught a touchdown last week. He's been involved, but yeah, this is the spot I would go to Pollard here and then see where you end up. Not just plug in Mason, but start thinking about, okay, Chicago, Detroit, and then work backwards. And if you happen to land on Mason or that works, fine, let's go there. But that's the type of builds I like when you go to this spot.
The only other running back really from down here, I think there are 2 options. I don't think that Judkins against Green Bay, anyone's going to use him. But, John, I was actually quite surprised with his usage rate against Baltimore a week ago. And I think we're going to see more of that, less of Jerome Ford, probably less of Dylan Sampson moving forward and more Judkins if that's a stance that you want to take. Or the better option in that spot, I mentioned that the Jets can't stop anyone on the ground. The Steelers also can't stop anyone on the ground. I have no idea if Joey Porter's going to come back and play. It doesn't look like it. And you just have Ramondre sitting there at $5,300. Everyone wants Stevenson to be a thing, but here's the issue. He's not. It's all Stevenson all the time, it seems.
Yeah, that could change at any moment, though. So I'm a little bit reluctant to go into those like timeshares or potential timeshares. I think like Judkins is a guy that is going to be useful at some point this season. I don't know if I want to pick on the Packers defense until further notice. Like going against the Packers defense might be a hands-off situation for me. But again, Frank, the Millie Maker contests, Judkins is not going to see ownership. If they just go, he did see surprisingly heavy usage, right? So I mean, if the Browns just start like handing him the ball over and over again, at some point opportunity outweighs a bad matchup. But yeah, I don't know. I'm a little bit reluctant because that's like heavy Ramondre Stevenson usage. Like that could have been a one-off, right? Like I don't know if we're going to see that every game going forward, just because the Patriots did draft another running back highly.
So the reason that we saw a lot of Ramondre last week, Tambo Henderson was in the game not all that much and had 3 holding calls against him. So they put him back on the bench and didn't use him all that much. And Ramondre was looking good in that game. I guess the other injury spot that we most definitely need to talk about is we haven't seen Zach Charbonnet practice at all this week, just leaving Kenneth Walker at $5,800 sitting there against the Saints. That it seems like a very logical spot to go to.
Yeah, and I think you can do that, even pair it up with the Seattle defense if you want as well. They're up at a little bit higher price point that we haven't seen or got to yet. And I think it's an interesting spot. It's actually a big survivor conversation this week with, Seattle, Green Bay, the conversation around that stuff. But Green Bay going into Cleveland, we've seen bad Cleveland teams in the dog pound still come out and take out good teams that are up against them.
Talking my language here. Browns, $2,200 defense. If the Browns keep this game competitive or win, it's because they are harassing Jordan Love.
Yeah, and what's weird is we were playing the Jets are projecting better. The Jets are who we had in there earlier at the same price, but we're not super high on Green Bay on anything that we've even talked about once. So it's kind of that's when I'm okay with just landing on that. I liked your call earlier of the Bucky stuff as well. So I'd be curious how it plays out if you have if you put in Kenneth Walker and Bucky, for example, and pick on a couple of those games, and then what does that leave us for Chicago, Detroit? If we want to still try and be within that game, since we haven't touched it yet, we didn't play Jordan Mason in this. So think about those conversations after the fact, but the Bucky spot seems pretty good too.
So the way that I have this out right now, John, it's Jones, Pittman, and Warren. Maybe we don't need Pittman with Pollard on the way back, Walker and Bucky with Browns D. That leaves us 2 wide receiver spots for $7,200 per player.
Yeah, I think that's a good spot. I like Jackson Smith and Jigba. I don't know if I would want to play him with Kenneth Walker, but it does actually make a bet on maybe Seattle is kind of racking up some points against the Saints defense there. So that's a consideration. Or we could go to the Chicago Dallas game, do a CeeDee Lamb or George Pickens. Actually, I think Pickens is a really interesting call if we're looking to save a little bit off and still get a piece of that game.
Well, let's take Pittman out because we'll just try to run it a bit skinnier here. We can go Pickens at 69. That still leaves us 67.50 for 2 more wide receiver spots. We can always rejig everything around. So we have Pickens in one spot. You can put Rome in another spot, let's say, and then now you have $8,200. You can get any receiver on the slate that you want. Now, Tambo, I know you're pretty out on just playing Chase by himself. You'd usually want Burrow to come along with him. Does that change if it's Jake Browning?
It does. It changes a lot because I think it's there's a couple different reasons. One, it's he's not Joe Burrow, and then 2, it's just the product of where we're at on this slate. If you're building with these running backs and you're not going to Bijan or any of the Jonathan Taylor or whatever that looks like for this particular lineup, I think that is where it gets a little bit interesting. So that's how I filled it out. Actually, I had Jamar Chase is in that game. I've got DJ Moore with Pickens, and you can put Odunze instead of DJ Moore, and then it landed you on Kenneth Walker with the Cleveland defense, like you talked about earlier. Just moving off Pittman made all that happen.
I can get behind this one. Just trying to scan it over. Where do you see anywhere where we can make some very logical changes, John, or does this look good to you?
I think that looks pretty good. I'm not sure I love the Browns defense, even at 2,200. Even playing at home, because the Packers have looked good. But again, the defensive scoring is so different and variant from actual NFL defensive performance that I think it's worth a shot.
Well, the way that I would try to sell the Browns defense this week would be how Jordan Love has played through the 2 weeks and the style of football that the Packers want to do. Now, is that going to be different? We obviously saw Jaden Reed get hurt last Thursday night. Who are they going to replace him with? Maybe Wicks in the slot. But then you start thinking about what they want to do. They actively want to move the ball down the field. They are taking shots in this game. They're banged up on the offensive line already. Now, maybe this is a turnaround and hand it to Jacobs 25 times. But the Browns, through 2 weeks, have done a very good job of taking away the elite skill sets on the other side of the field. They shut down Chase, Burrow, and Higgins week 1, and they still got because of the stupid Browns. Last week against the Ravens, Lamar didn't do anything, Henry didn't do anything, Zay Flowers didn't do anything. I guess my issue here with the Packers, Tambo, would be that if the Browns can commit to taking away the two best things offensively because of this beat up offensive line that the Packers do well. That would be Jacobs and that intermediate passing, which is probably going to force Love, because he wants to go big down the field, which means the longer dropbacks and more chances for sacks, strips, and interceptions if they can get him off his game a little bit. This could be the Jordan Love throws 5 touchdowns, 400 yards game, but if it swings the other way, I just think they bring so much pressure that it's worth gambling on them at the mid price.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I will say the Love factor that you just talked about, if that happens, put it this way, Green Bay is already hopping onto people's radars after 2 weeks of being a lot better than you might think. If he goes into Cleveland, again, people say the Browns stink, whatever. It is hard. We've seen, I know it as a Ravens fan, I've seen Ravens in prime form go in there and still lose outright with Lamar Jackson and things that are happening. So the point would be, if that happens, good for him. But I mean, that's kind of the other way you could leverage it. But I think I'm fine with your call, Pat, with going with the $2,200 defense, especially when we don't really love the Green Bay side. I did find the way to fill that lineup out better that I think that actually projects better too, if you want it.
You hit me.
It was Daniel Jones, Warren, Pollard, like we had. You can go Jordan Mason, Jamar Chase, mini stack. You can go Rome Odunze, Pickens mini stack, and then it lands back on your Houston Texans D that you were on earlier. Pretty solid.
Yeah. I mean, you can play both versions of that. I like the idea of using the Browns just because I spelled out my case, John. I also think that optimizers are going to spit out the Jets, who I think might be I don't think that they're a better defense. They might be in a better spot, but I don't think that they're going to have the variance of swings the way the Browns defense can, if that makes any sense. Plus, you're going to get them at like 1/8 the ownership because no one's going to use the Browns D.
I really love the contrarian thinking. I just think that Josh Jacobs is going to steamroll them. So like, I'm just not high on the Browns, but I love the thought process and the contrarian mindset.
All right, let's move to a different game because we've kind of done the big 3 ones right now. Do you think it's worth talking about the San Francisco-Arizona game with a lot of the unknowns, John, that are in it right now? Like, we don't know if it's Purdy or if it's going to be Mac Jones. I'm guessing it's going to be Mac Jones if I really had to have hard-earned money on it. But again, I don't think that matters all that much of how this game ends up playing out. Juwan Jennings didn't practice at all last week, played at the last second, and he was fine. He's not currently practicing right now. I think that he goes again. But if he doesn't, it's $500 more to get to Ricky Bullets if that's really the way that you want to go. Do you think there's a way to build this out that makes sense? Or do you think it's kind of let's wait till the weekend to figure this one out?
I like dealing with the uncertainty on Fridays, right? Like, because nobody does it, and like so much content is produced on Fridays, and everyone looks at like the Washington game, goes, well, we don't know if Jaden Daniels is going to play. Let's just skip over that. But we should not skip over that, right? Like the same thing with like San Francisco. Like, it's worth talking about these games and building things out, right? Because like, yeah, people will know by Sunday generally whether who's in and who's out. We should talk about it on Friday. There's nothing wasted talking about it.
So where would you want to start here, Tambo? Would you want to go? I would want to play the San Francisco side passing wise and then figure out the rest from there.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at earlier when you mentioned sort of the other thing. Like I say, I like John's point. Nobody everybody just avoids it until they get there. But then, like I said earlier, with laziness, the time they actually might need to get there is Sunday afternoon. And that's when you see, especially casual players or we're in a bubble, people that are just trying to get better at the game, where that's where they really struggle with late swap and like, when do I make the move and which one and where do I start? And so if you have an idea early on of what might be good, then you'll kind of know where you can go. This also fits, Pat, for what we talked about earlier, is let's say Mason busts and you got a bunch of those lineups with Chicago, Detroit. Maybe you need to move here. So you like Jennings. I know we're going to have to wait on that news, but I liked your call of Pearsall being just like right there. What is he, $500 more or something? So you're always going to be able to find that money and move it around if you have to.
Especially because we have McCaffrey here. And if this is something that you really need to get around, just as it pertains to the late games themselves, if you have McCaffrey locked into one of your running back spots, you can drop to Kenneth Walker. You can drop to Kamara. You can drop to either any side of that Dallas and Chicago game. You can even go to James Conner, which I don't think I love in this spot just based on his usage last week. But that's if like Mac Jones gets declared inactive or he's the backup and Purdy's playing, then you need to find $1,000. You need to find $500 for Jennings, or just move to, you can drop down to Troy Franklin if you really wanted to in that spot. Like if you need to go from Jennings and Mac Jones, I know it doesn't correlate as well, but all of a sudden like they're not playing. You can go to Purdy and Troy Franklin, just a 2v2 for exactly the same price from the late game if that's the way that you want to do it. This would be my preferred setup, Tambo, of this game. Jones, McCaffrey, Jennings with McBride, but it could be smart to use Marvin Harrison here, unless he just sucks and we should stop using him ever.
Of course he does. We're in week 3, Pat. He's terrible.
I mean, he's been terrible for now 2 years.
Yeah.
That's part of it.
I do believe that people were bringing that up last week as well. You could certainly see a turnaround, and that would be the flip side of this game. Like, the Kyler Murray interviews and stuff saying there's only one ball. Everyone knows how it works. And, you can't promise could have this many catches, could have that many catches. There is certainly something to be said for flipping the build and going with Kyler Murray, Harrison, and McBride. You even already talked about, not loving the Connor spot, and then you'd be able to put Jennings on the other side, Pat, or McCaffrey if you wanted, and then go down from there. But if you went with Jennings, you'd be able to find more late swap opportunity because you'd have really everything covered there. And as things become more clear, you'd be able to easily swap it around.
Any interest in Michael Wilson at all, John? Just the fact that they're using him like inside the 10-yard line and he's scoring touchdowns, but he doesn't seem to be used at all outside of that.
Yeah, I have some interest. Like, people don't generally go there, but if we're going to switch to Kyler Murray, like, I think getting the peripheral wide receivers is a good idea. I'll add on the Trey McBride versus Marvin Harrison. A good but not great Trey McBride game is probably going to do a lot more for us than a good but not great Marvin Harrison game. Because if they have an okay game, right? They get some receptions, some good yardage totals, but not a touchdown. Like, Trey McBride is still, that might leave Trey McBride as the highest scoring tight end on the week. But Marvin Harrison's going to be lapped by a bunch of wide receivers who put up monster scores. So I do prefer McBride over Harrison. But if we're using Kyler Murray, I think we can use both, or we can switch to a Michael Wilson.
So let's do that, because we save a lot of money with Michael Wilson, Tambo, at $3,400. Sort of a fade on Marvin this spot. Kyler, Wilson, McBride with Juwan Jennings coming back. Would it be nonsensical to not play McCaffrey in this lineup?
I think it's fine at that point, because like I said, you could set it up kind of the way you have it now. And then there's no harm or foul in going something like Jordan Mason, but wait, I'm going to put in Bucky Irving and Josh Jacobs instead, or something along those lines where you're kind of going more balanced with the build, but you're covering some of the same angles that we've talked about here. You might be able to fit JSN in. That's how we could start getting a little bit more balanced build. So I'd have no problem with that, and just moving off McCaffrey in the spot.
Well, there's one player in particular that we haven't spoken about yet who I think rates out the best at wide receiver. He's been the best receiver through 2 weeks, and it doesn't even feel, John, like he's had a huge game, although both of his games have been really big, and it's Puka.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, I think Puka's going way overlooked. He's, I believe, leading the league in receiving yards or receptions, and he's pretty far down on the price list. I guess he's third, but still leading the league in receptions and a point per reception scoring, and he's not seeing outsized ownership. I think he's got a rushing touchdown, but not a receiving touchdown this season. But yeah, I agree. I think he's going under owned.
So you could do this, and I think this makes it wildly different, because now we don't have really anything as a part of that Chicago and Dallas game, Tambo, is that you could go Puka and Barkley. Because Barkley hasn't done anything. People aren't using Saquon Barkley anymore. That seems like it's going to blow up in everyone's face. I'd rather be there the week early on Saquon at super low ownership when he puts up 45 DraftKings points with Puka on the other side, rather than waiting for him to do it and be like, man, I should have played Saquon. That made a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think I'm sure, again, in portfolio, he's going to fit in there. He's 7,800 and lower ownership than all the guys around him, but it's more of the options below I'm seeing, Josh Jacobs, or Bucky Irving, or Jonathan Taylor, or the, Alvin Kamara spot we talked about earlier. You can kind of get to a bunch of these guys down here and still get away with this. So it really depends on who else you're putting in. I like Puka in there, but then what else do we have for a value play if you land on that?
No one really on the Eagles. I went Barkley, Mason, Puka, and then the Texans defense. Is what I ended up throwing in. That gave us $6,200 for a flex if we wanted to. Now, where could we go here? You could pick off, I think in that Dallas game, Pickens would be right around that price. He's $5,900. You could upgrade somewhere else, or you could just kind of blow it up and say, hey, John, what is your take on Barkley here if we do play Puka?
I think with this lineup, I would just go to McCaffrey. I know we were talking about, fading McCaffrey, but he's going to start. It feels like he starts the game with a bunch of receptions. If we're playing multiple pieces from this game as it is, I would put McCaffrey in there. Yeah, and then see what we can do. Yeah, Kenneth Walker looks perfect.
Yeah, Kenneth Walker immediately slots in. And I guess that too, Tambo, that like Puka is a pretty good one-off player, even if you don't want to go to that game, isn't he?
Oh, certainly. That's what I was going to say. Like a guy, that's like the thing about a guy like Puka is he can just catch 10 balls for 140 and that's it. But it's like, that's not it. That's quite a bit. And that's a lot of points and you'll take it at 7,700, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything else for that game because Philly can spread it around a ton, or it can be Jalen Hurts or Saquon who doesn't really kill you because, you know, people have them, but not enough in the right places. So I'm all for builds like that. And I think just not enough people are willing to do that. They just think you have to double stack or get a secondary in or something like that right away. So I'm fine with that build as is.
So let's try to hit on a few more of these other games. Anything that you think that we've overlooked? There is one team in particular, John, that I think that is sitting out there and no one is playing potentially the good side of that game.
Not sure. I was going to say like Washington and the Raiders like leading into some more uncertainty. But in terms of like one team that's getting overlooked, Jacksonville.
I was going to say it's the Atlanta everyone besides Bijan. Because Bijan super popular.
Carolina defense.
Like Carolina sucks. Like they're actively bad.
But I think the rushing defense is so much worse than everything else, which is already mediocre. So that's why people are rightfully going to Bijan. But yeah, I think Bijan is going to see some significant ownership. So I think going to a Atlanta passing instead of rushing is definitely feasible.
I would even swing at Tambo. Is that one thing that we've seen from Bijan so far is his work in the receiving game? Like, could you play Penix with Bijan in London and could go that way?
I'd probably play Penix, London, Pitts, and then figure out which Carolina guy you want, which probably Tet.
Yeah, Tet. I mean, do you get bonus DraftKings points for one-handed catches every week that don't count? Because Tet would be leading the league in that with 2 so far through 2 weeks.
Yes, with the sample size of 2, we would make those assumptions. But yeah, like I said, I don't count anything that happened. Just like everybody just buries themselves in it. I literally don't care. We're on week 3 right now, so it's just what is the field doing? How would I build against them to put myself in a spot that I could find myself at the top of the tournament? And again, just go back to week 2 if you forget how this works. Russell Wilson throwing up air like just massive high pops, like you used to play baseball, the high poppers, throw me a high popper. Yeah, he was just throwing those up and guys like Neighbors are just catching them. So anything can happen at any given time. I just think if you're looking to build out differently, that's another spot where you've already done enough and now you can kind of do whatever you want. Like you could just fill this lineup out with anything that you see possible.
Do you think, John, that maybe we don't even think about Penix or Pitts as a part of this and just play London and McMillan with each other?
Yeah, I think there's like do like a mini stack. And get rid of Penix. Then it's gonna be so tempting to put Bijan into this lineup, but I'll try to restrain myself. I think that's a really good mini stack.
So we could figure it out the other way too. Like, there's not any jet that I particularly want to play, but I do really want to play Bucky because Egbuka's banged up as well, and I just think you can pound those guys on the ground. I'm just going to throw in 2 names here that I like this week, and I got to try to figure out how to use them. So, Tambo, I need you to help me talk me through this. You too, John. I like Bucky Irving, and I think this is a nice spot to play Brian Thomas Jr., honestly.
Yeah, I guess for me, the big thing was when you mentioned what spot were we overlooking, I was thinking about going back to Jacksonville, especially in a matchup with Houston. I feel like we've actually seen those teams just have some heavy back and forth in the past. It's kind of a middling total, tight spread. I could definitely see this game going a little bit higher than people think and getting that back and forth when, again, another guy that's presumed dead is Brian Thomas, but we know what he can do in any given week, and he's still even priced up a little bit that people might not be as excited at 6,400 thinking, he hasn't done anything for me. So why would I pay that kind of price? I think it's possible here.
John, do you think it's better to use Brian Thomas, even in the context of this lineup? Like, is Garrett Wilson just a better option, or is the Jets offense too far gone that just taking no one is usually the better play?
I was going right to Garrett Wilson, even if you didn't mention him. I was going to say, because Tampa Bay gave up the most receptions in the league last year. They gave up the 3rd most receiving yards. Passing wise, Tyrod Taylor might be an upgrade over Justin Fields. I know Justin Fields has looked good, but Tyrod is a 36-year-old backup, but he's been capable in the past, and Justin Fields is still not a huge passing threat. I like the idea of playing if we're playing Bucky Irving in the lineup. I really like the idea of playing Garrett Wilson.
So let's say we start here. Then we have Bucky and Wilson and Tet and London in this lineup. How do we pick a quarterback because we can either pair it up with a tight end or a flex or use one of the quarterbacks from this game. If you really wanted to use like Bryce Young or Penix or even Tyrod for a really cheap price and then fill out the rest with very chalky options, Tambo. What do you think the best route here? Is this like Caleb Adunze, Javonte Williams to fill it out and then put Jordan Mason into the flex?
I think you figure out your Chicago-Detroit spot first. Like whatever you want to do that. If it wants to be Javonte with a Rome in the flex, and obviously it'll go by whoever's game is when they're in the afternoon, so it probably is that, and then you can kind of see what the rest looks like as you're filling it out, because we already have defenses in every price range, so we don't need to worry about that, and then it's just what else fills this thing out depending on what you like. So that's how I look at it.
Let's try this. Let's go Dak, Lamb, DeAndre Swift, and it gives us 2,600 for a tight end. That might be too little.
I'll jump in and say we did a lineup earlier with a quarterback and a tight end pairing, and we didn't want to do a run back. It was Daniel Jones and Tyler Warren.
Yeah,
I like that.
Not Jalen Warren, Tyler Warren. So we can get rid of Swift in that spot too. So now we have an empty flex and an empty running back spot. That would have us at 6,150 left over. Like that's a pick and Swift spot potentially.
Could be, yeah. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, let's look for something. The other thing I'll say from earlier, just a note, and I don't think anyone's going to get to this or even think about it, but we were on Houston at 2,700. The Dallas D is 2,700 as well. And if you aren't getting to that game, you're not doing anything in that spot, and you want to be against, we've seen this so many times, like Rome is super popular, even as one-offs, and you'll see the lineups that have Dallas and not him or something, because that's typically how lineups are built. That's another thing as well, as if you didn't want to get to something there, you could go either side of that.
You could do that, John, or because it doesn't seem like we're playing anything from that Minnesota-Cincinnati game as of yet. I like the call on the Cowboys, Tambo. What about the Bengals defense? And just be like, oh yeah, Carson Wentz is the other quarterback. This is fantasy points galore, no matter how bad the other defense is.
Very, very possible. Yes, exactly.
So if we do that and we throw in Bengals D, we end up with $6,300 left. I don't know how to properly allocate this, John. Where would you go here?
I think we lost John.
No, John's gone.
John gone.
All right, so it's me and you, Tambo.
No, that's fine. The thing is, we are still missing. So my first thing would be looking at Swift, and it leaves me 7,000, and then I would go to Javonte, and it leaves me 6,500. Do either of those spots have something like, okay, John liked Jackson Smith and Jigba before. If you get the points on the ground from Dallas, you're not playing Mason with Cincinnati, and you just end up getting JSN in there. When I think this week too, by the way, Pat, we will see the way this plays out is if
Charbonnet's out, everyone's going to use Walker. No one's going to use JSN.
Right, and you'll have JSN there. So to me, that build is solid. I wouldn't say phenomenal, but for how we built it out, it makes a ton of sense. I see nothing wrong with a build like this. It would make sense on paper.
Would this be one of the lineups that you would think to go to? John, are you back with us? No. Maybe not.
Might have to adjust that mic again, but.
Yeah, whatever you did to your mic last time before the show, do that again. But would this be, because I know we put in Warren and Daniel Jones here, Tambo, would this be a lineup where you would want to maybe even go with like the really cheap tight ends, whether it is Wentz, Tyrod would be, I mean, we could put Tyrod into this pretty easily. Garrett Wilson's in this lineup already, and then that starts saving us a bunch of money if we did want to upgrade somewhere else.
I was going to say earlier that, and Feinberg knows this all too well, but Tyrod was going to be a star until he got needled.
Yeah, but he only got needled so they could play Justin Herbert.
Yeah, that's true. So it kind of a flip at that point. But I'm saying if you put him in at 4,800 here, he makes a lot more work, right? You could even, who's the other guy I saw popping earlier? Was like Mason Taylor or something?
No, we're not doing that.
You don't have to, but I'm saying like that's the spot. You can just go Taylor, Wilson, Bucky, and do whatever you want at that point.
Yeah, so we have Taylor, Wilson, Bucky already in this lineup. I'm going to get rid of Javonte and get rid of JSN in this spot. Now we have $6,600 to play around with. And if we do put, let's say we put in Javonte, I mean, the problem is if we put in Javonte, then that doesn't give us anything in the Dallas passing game whatsoever. That if we use, let's see, can we get to Lamb? If we get to Lamb, we have 5,200 for a running back. Does that work at all, do you think?
Isn't DeAndre close to that?
Swift is 5,600, and the problem is unless we drop down,
you could do like a block. You could do like a Ferguson Lamb, no Dak, because they're just going to rack catches across from DeAndre and have three pieces. And if the game doesn't go off, you hope it's because Chicago tries to keep it on the ground, and then they just got to play catch up. But the game doesn't shoot out because you've got it built a different way. So obviously it's not going to project as well. Just noting that type of stuff works as well when you go there. What do you got, Juwan instead?
Yeah, you can go with Juwan Johnson just for $100 less, and hopefully that's where it goes in that game.
Yeah, that works too.
John, are you back?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yeah, there we go. So, while you were gone, Tambo bullied me into playing this lineup. What do you think about this?
How did we get Tyrod Taylor?
We took out Daniel Jones just to try to save some money here.
Okay, I think it makes sense. I think he's capable. I agree. I think people forget the Justin Herbert needling story, the Wally Pippen that happened there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And then we build all these good lineups, and then we land on the one that we think is the worst, and all of a sudden it scores the best. That's the way this stuff typically works. But it was just a way to free up money. The tricky is, Pat, too, and maybe John agrees or disagrees, but I'll say, when you do that, it's what I talk about all the time. It's like you're already kind of off the road. Like you're not quite in the ditch, but because there's correlation, but you are off the road, you're a little bit impaired. You don't have to just continuously drive it off the cliff. You can, get back on track by start playing some of the other good plays, and you're already different enough with just Tyrod in there, as you like to call him. So that's good.
Do you like, John, how much do you like DeAndre Swift at all?
It's tough because I can see it going either way. I think he's a good play. I have some concern. I would use him more for the larger field contest because it's a shootout environment. I'm just not entirely sold on this.
He's also way more to me of a late swap, not to cut you off, but just to say he's the guy that if you got Rome and you have the opportunity with a flex to be involved, it's well, now I kind of if my stuff is no good or I'm down, why am I keeping Rome in there as just the most chalky one-off plus stacks plus everything when you can just move to switch? If again you have to have the flex spot and multiple options, I get it. I'm just saying that's how I would think of him more than just plugging them in, building early. That's my 2 cents.
So the other way we could think about this too. So I put in Jordan Mason in the DeAndre Swift spot and took out Bengals defense. You can put Cowboys defense in as the Cowboys portion of that game. That gives us $8,000 left, which coincidentally lands you exactly on CeeDee Lamb in that spot. Bijan, Barkley, Puka is still up there. Is there a way to fill that out? Do we try to find the extra $200, just not care about that game, move on from it, and play a few lineups that just don't have anything with it? Or should we try to find a way to rework everyone in?
I think playing the Cowboys defense makes a different statement about that game. And I don't mind CeeDee Lamb in there as well. You're just saying the Bears crumble, and Dallas takes the game behind CeeDee Lamb.
Would you agree with that? Could you play Lamb and the defense, Tambo?
For sure, 100%. And it's just something people, again, if you get optimizers spitting out lineups, you'll see stuff like this all the time because there's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't not make sense. It's just some people that are hand building will think, oh, that's weird. I only see a running back defense correlation that works and all this stuff. Even that's not fully true anymore. It's not always the case of what's needed. So I think that's interesting. Also just got a little bit of news, Pat, is Jaden Daniels not seen in practice, Egbuka participating in practice. So while we're on this game, Egbuka conversation we had earlier, just an update.
So let's move on to that game that you wanted to talk about and start thinking about some of these skinnier stacks that we can play around with, John, of that Washington games. Now it's looking worse and worse like Daniels is going to play, which means Mariota would be playing quarterback. Where would you want to use players from that game? Where would you want to try to leverage this spot that no one really wants to touch now?
I would start with Mariota, but he's gonna gain some popularity because he adds rushing points as well. And he looked decent in his, I think he had one relief appearance for Jane Daniels last year, actually maybe 2. I think week 18 as well. But yeah, I would start with Mariota. I think he's going to be popular, and at only 4,000, I think Carson Wentz's ownership is going to go down. And this is all presuming that the Jane Daniels not practicing on Friday means that Mariota is going to play.
The only, I guess maybe Ertz would fit into that mix if you wanted to triple him up, but I would feel very comfortable with just Debo with Mariota, Tambo.
Or I'm not as thrilled about it in any way, shape, or form, to be honest. But I guess if you're going there, the idea is too, it'd be different than if people land on Wentz at the exact same $4,000, then you could start to build around that concept. But yeah, I'm good with just Debo, like you said, maybe Jacoby Myers on the run back, and just hope that it goes that way.
Yeah, well, would it be Myers for you, John, on the Raiders side, or would you want to do a Bowers or a Genty, not knowing what's going on with them?
I think I'd lean Jacoby Myers because he's going to get the receptions. Like, I mean, and you want to say that about Brock Bowers as well. He just hasn't looked totally healthy. Like, he hasn't been like the Brock Bowers of last year. Maybe it's small sample size, but maybe it's nagging injury. So I'd go with Jacoby Myers. He's perennially underpriced at full point per reception.
So if we're going to talk about some of these other games very quickly, if it's Houston and Jacksonville that we're looking at, is there a skinny stack in that game or a particular piece, John, that you do like?
If I'm going to that game, it's probably Nico Collins.
Tambo?
Yeah, probably Nico, Brian Thomas Jr. Like I said, if I'm playing that game, I'm actually probably going to that game versus just finding pieces. I think what's more interesting is, like, in this build that you're looking at now, is I think when you're making the swap from Carson Wentz at 4K to Mariota at 4K, obviously you can just plug in Jordan Mason, but if Mariota picks up steam and whatever, I'm just saying, I guess my thoughts would be, you could also just, now that you have all this money to spend, you could go something like Hawkinson at tight end and just load up with like 3 running backs that should crush. And then running backs are kind of like pitchers in baseball. They don't always come through as chalk, but they're more likely, there's a reason they're priced up, their props are the way they are, etc. That's where you would be able to get a little bit different in that sense and just build it up top to bottom. And then if you got to change McCaffrey down to Jonathan Taylor, so be it. Or maybe you have them both in there. It's like, that's kind of what I'm thinking. What do you got?
That's pretty interesting to me, honestly. John, when we take a look at this too, oh man, my main man, Cedric Tillman, best play on the slate, still only $4,500. He never doesn't come through. I'll give you that.
I would say that how many people are playing a $4,000 quarterback if it's not Carson Wentz and putting Justin Jefferson into the lineup? And I think that's somewhat of the same thought process maybe as having TJ Hawkinson. But you know, it's not impossible that like Hawkinson and Justin Jefferson are getting a bunch of receptions. Maybe they each get a touchdown, but Marcus Mariota is running 2 in, right? So like Mariota outscores Wentz, even though Jefferson and Hawkinson are having decent days.
Yeah,
I think that's like a really different lineup, and we still got the Deebo Samuel, Jacoby Myers.
So you could go Bucky and Bijan. You swap out that McCaffrey spot in the flex for Jefferson. So you have Jefferson, Hawkinson, but with Mariota, and that's exactly enough money for Rome Odunze.
Can you get? I was trying to get like Ferguson in there though instead
of Hawkinson. Yeah,
well, now that I like his call, like again, if you're going Jefferson there, I like the call of that kind of setup where it makes a lot of sense that you could still have Mariota outdo Wentz. But so the example is quite simple. Like you get 8 for 105 and a touchdown for Jefferson. That doesn't mean very much for Wentz. And Wentz is not as likely to be running. Again, we've seen him do stuff and get a little crazy, but I'm just saying like that's kind of the thought process I would have as well. I guess the other way to go, Pat, would just be to round it out with your Jennings play. Right? You could put Jennings in and go back up to your Houston D, and you'd have Ferguson in the tight end. And you'd get, instead of McCaffrey, who you took out, you go to Jennings and land on Houston, or you'd have enough for 2,800. You could play Dallas with no Rome in the lineup. Like you could do a couple different things there, but I think that's another interesting way to build it.
Yeah, John, I went Rome, Ferguson, Jefferson with Browns D to round it out. We do have $300 left, so you can upgrade any one of those guys. You could upgrade to Panthers, Titans, Rams, Bengals, Raiders, Saints. I think on the whole, I like the idea of the Rams a lot as a defense this week. I just worry that Philly doesn't pass the ball ever. There's just not that many fantasy points to be scored against them.
Yeah, I think you could go to the $2,500 defenses like the Titans or the Panthers as well. I like the Rams as an NFL defense. I don't know that I necessarily love them as a fantasy defense going against Philadelphia, but then again, neither will anybody else. And defensive scoring is so random.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why I like it. It's random, but I think that, Tambo, you can correlate it to not only is Philadelphia running the ball way more than anyone else, they're not throwing the ball down the field. They're also running a hilariously few amount of plays and taking forever to snap the ball. Like they're just not running plays.
Yeah, I don't know how you want to equate that to what we're building, but to me, it's like the setup of putting that defense in it's if you land there, you land there. Like for the Rams that you're talking about, it's just a spot where if you land on it, I'm fine, but I'm not looking to like source them into my builds.
Yeah, I think I'd rather play the Saints or the Bengals, honestly. At least they play against quarterbacks who just chuck the ball up.
Yeah, I like the Bengals call earlier that you had as well, just because it's a spot where you can definitely get different. And it's, it's a way if you're not playing Mason or something like that in there. In this lineup, obviously we have Jefferson, but I'm just saying you can swap that around pretty easily as well.
Yeah, you could go Bengals D. Let's see if we can do this. Bengals D.
With Barkley?
Yeah, you could get to Barkley. You could get to Jonathan Taylor off Bucky Irving. I'm pretty comfortable with Bijan and Bucky as our two guys here. I guess it's whether or not it's Jefferson. If you take Jefferson out, you get up to 56 or 76, sorry. You're almost at Puka. Since we're not using McCaffrey, we can go down to Jennings from Rome. Now we have 79. Yeah, you get Barkley or Puka in there. You could try to find a way. Actually, you could go Juwan Johnson and get CeeDee Lamb back in there if you wanted to. That works out perfectly. That's the switch you could make. And that way you're completely fading that Minnesota-Cincinnati game.
And still have a piece of Dallas, Chicago, yeah.
Yeah, you have a mini stack of Dallas, Chicago, John, but you have Bengals D going in that other game and no Jordan Mason.
Yeah, I don't know. For the record, I didn't mind the Justin Jefferson against the Bengals defense because I think that's something that could hit. Like, it's not impossible that Wentz just locks in on Justin Jefferson, but also gets sacked a bunch, like, because he can't move.
Or, I mean, this was always the Jameis thing that I brought up to Tambo, John, and he always laughed me out, that maybe the best triple stack you could make for the Vikings is Wentz, Jefferson, and Bengals defense.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that's a good call.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. He throws some pick sixes, then some long touchdowns to Jefferson, Tambo. We're set.
I'll bet pretty heavy that that's not in the winning lineups on Sunday, but it's possible. It's definitely possible.
Well, look, listen, I think you'd probably bet heavy that almost anything is not in the winning lineup.
I do bet on myself. That's the nice thing about this show. You got people on it that actually play DFS and not just talk about it. So we will see how it ends up on Sunday. There's some great tournaments out there on both sites, and this is good. I love talking through it early with you guys. I'm happy to be back in the booth with you. It's awesome.
All right, what do you got going on this weekend over at Ship It?
A couple different things. The big thing right now is just the free trial promo, so you can go check it out. I've got a new show launching tonight, though, with Alex Blickel. It's called Leverage Lane, and it focuses on those that play 1 to 20 max. So single entry, 3 max, and 20 max, and it's really looking at the slate as a whole, how you can leverage things, and if you only had one lineup or a single entry, how you might go about playing that. So we're super excited for that show. It's going to be on the Ship It Nation YouTube station as usual.
John, I know you're going live on 4for4.com a little bit later on with the entire crew to really, to break this down a little bit more now that we've talked through the slate a little bit. But I'm someone that usually just plays one lineup. You want to know my process of picking lineups?
Absolutely.
We build these ones on the show, and then I just close my eyes and pick one of them and hit enter.
Yeah, perfect. You got
Easy
two
game.
short minds here.
Yeah, listen, I feel good. You guys have helped me. What am I going to do? Add my 2 cents to it? That sounds like a terrible idea.
Yeah, we need you, Bat. We need you.
Yeah, you need me asking the general shitter bro questions of how should I fill this out? Oh, I like that guy. I like that. Like when Bucky Irving sucks this week, it's because I've been watching the games and think that I know something about football. And when he sucks, I'll be like, oh yeah, I don't. That's the way that we're looking.
In a good spot.
Yeah, he is in a good spot. Anyone against the Jets is in a good spot. So, John, you're doing that. Code Mayo for 25% off. Also, if people are really wanting to get in on Sharp Stack, there's a new monthly plan. You can get a free week and 50% off just for the monthly. If you use code Mayo50 over at 4for4, you get a free trial week and a month at 50% off of that price. But, John, what do you have coming up this weekend? Is your cheat sheet going to be out later tonight or early on Saturday?
Cheat sheet should be out any minute as soon as it goes through the process. And then I've got a more extended article that'll be coming out early this evening, probably usually around 6 p.m. Got the 12:30 DFS MVP podcast. Davis Maddock, Neil Warfield, Pat Curran. We're all on there together, talking through all the positions. And then, my solo ship podcast with JM to Win comes out usually around 4 o'clock or so.
Awesome. Everyone go over to the 4for4 YouTube channel, the Ship It Nation YouTube channel. You can find more John and more Tambo over there. I would like for you to subscribe to the Mayo Media Network because we're going to be live on Sunday evening with Cust and a very special guest. He's going to be eating as well as we instantly recap the week. And then I'll have my video cheat sheet, podcast cheat sheet, and written cheat sheet coming out on Saturday afternoon. That's all completely free. You can get it on the audio, video, or subscribe to the Mayo Media newsletter right now. It's completely free. It'll just get sent to you. Make it easy on yourself, all right? Hit the like on the way out, and I will see you next time.